Welcome to the investor briefing for ADX Energy. During the next 10 minutes, the ADX management, Wolfgang Zimmer and Paul Fink, will give you an update on the results of the City Daha 1 well test, followed by an overview on the company strategy for the near future. After that, I will ask some questions which have been collected from investors by email. During the webcast, you are also invited to send additional questions to the following email address: adx@tsp.at. I will receive them, and if time permits, take some into the discussion. If you prefer to listen in German, just use the button Replay in German. Let's begin. Wolfgang, would you give us an overview on the current status in City Daha?
On Saturday, the 23rd of June, at 6 a.m. in the morning, we had produced 680 barrels of water and decided to stop the test. Analysis confirmed the water, and we also decided then to plug and abandon the well. Today, all the rig equipment has been transported off location, and also most of the camp equipment has been taken away, and the well will be abandoned and the location restored. What we will do now is Paul will give a short technical presentation on how we arrived at a decision to test and what happened during the test.
Okay, thank you, Wolfgang. The presentation will be also later on our website for the viewers in much higher quality, so you can look at the details later on. I start the presentation with the announcement on the 3rd of October 2011, where we announced on the ADX Stock Exchange that we have interpreted from pressure data an oil column in the order of 30 meters, and also that we've recovered some oil. And this was the start of our decision to well test. The first evidence we already had during the drilling. We had a very good team of well site geologists with local experience. They had some good evidence for a good reservoir and also some small oil fluorescence. In addition to that, we had gas chromatography, gas readings, which are also indicative of hydrocarbons. And the best gas shows we interestingly had in the section where we also had our seismic flat spot. In addition to that, we ran wireline logs with Schlumberger, and they confirmed essentially what our well site geologists had been seeing. In other words, we had very good reservoir in the Barreno Dolomite, which is a lower reservoir, and in an upper reservoir section, a reservoir which was not that good quality but still acceptable and is also producing in nearby fields in the area. This allowed us to make an interpretation that we had some hydrocarbons in analogy to the low resistivity log response in similar carbonate rocks in nearby fields. For the experts amongst the viewers, low resistivity is something which you do not associate with hydrocarbons usually. However, in carbonate rocks that can be common, such as in fields in Tunisia. The next slide, slide number 4 for the viewers, is just showing the same message again in pictures. Here's a picture of our well site geologist. If you look carefully in the background is a microscope. They looked at the rocks. This is the middle picture, the upper one, where you can see the blue holes are sort of the good porosity. And they also did a permeability profile where you can see sort of an increase in the lower part, meaning the lower part is good reservoir. The upper part is sort of maybe good reservoir, but not that clear yet. Therefore, and that's the bottom line now, you could see that we were running wireline logs. The right picture shows Schlumberger putting one of these tools down into the earth. And the left picture is actually one of the results we get from wireline logging, where you can see that we have on top of our reservoir section a so-called cap rock. Immediately beneath that, the gas shows started, and also the interpreted oil column with a limestone reservoir, and further down a dolomite reservoir, which we knew from the beginning already with very clear evidence would be an excellent reservoir. We then were encouraged and gathered more evidence. And the evidence we gathered was an investment in XPT and MDT. These are tools which measure the pressure in the reservoir and also allow us to get oil samples or mud filtrate samples. In our case, the pressure data indicated an oil column. This was interpretive, and the oil sample was retrieved together with the mud filtrate. We had put a lot of mud into the system, so we recovered a mixture of both oil and mud. Here is again a slide just showing in pictures what I've shown earlier in text. So on the bottom, on the left picture on the top, you can see a symbolic picture of our tool with the radius investigation into the earth, not too much, but where we recovered the oil from. Also a canister which shows actually the mixture of mud filtrate and oil. You can clearly see the rim of oil on top. And we sent this sample to Core Lab in Aberdeen, which is a reputed big company, mainly active in the North Sea. We wanted to give it outside of Tunisia, and they came back with a result which encouraged us because the oil was not only good quality, but also typical crude oil for the area. The plot on the right, and I answer a question of many shareholders with that, I hope shows you why we announced 30 meter of oil column. We had pressure data, we did an interpretation, a number of experts looked into that. In a most conservative interpretation, we came up with this oil-water contact. We had an optimistic interpretation, and we thought the 30 meters would be, given all the data, the most likely one. So we made a decision to test. The positive indications were presence of good reservoir. We had an oil sample, and we had quite a bit of pressure data allowing us to interpret an oil column. We had some uncertainties. As I said earlier, the wired and log interpretation in relation to the oil and water saturation was uncertain because we had some missing information, water resistivity, water salinities, and rock information. We also had some uncertainties on the depth position of the oil-water contact. In other words, how big is the oil column? And last not least, what is the reservoir quality of the upper reservoir section? The lower one we knew would be very good. It was a decision under uncertainty, so the joint venture took some time to go forward with a decision, took a clear decision to test this well, and it was also supported very strongly by the local Tunisian authority, in this case ETAP, which is the local company.
Paul, I think it's also important to note at this point for our viewers to understand that what the alternative would have been. We would have had to ignore all the positive indications that we found a structure, we found a reservoir, we had a good seal, we had an oil sample, we had good indications from logs and good indications from our well site geologist. All of this we should have ignored and not tested. It was definitely not a way to decide at this point in time.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Wolfgang. And with that, I now show you what we did in the test. The test design is very important to understand what happened in the well. As I said earlier, we did not know exactly where the oil-water contact is. So in case the lower very good reservoir would have quite a bit of water, because the lower conservative oil-water contact interpretation would be the correct one, we designed the test in such a way that we could mitigate for a case and squeeze off, in other words, put a cement seal in between these two formations and just produce the oil from the not so good oil-bearing upper reservoir. Because if you don't do that, all you will see is water flushing from the lower reservoir. What happened? We perforated both zones at the same time, hoping that we would get a lot of oil from the lower zone and also from the upper zone. After flowing a little bit of fluids and mud filtrate and probably also some formation water, we abandoned this test. We already had gained 2 pieces of information. The flow rates were quite good. Actually, we did not need any stimulation, acid stimulation, etc., which told us it was an excellent reservoir. The high flow rates also indicated that the production was exclusively coming from the lower very good reservoir. It flushed through with water, and that would mean we would never see any oil from the upper reservoir. And it also meant that, unfortunately, the oil-water contact conservative interpretation was the correct one. With that, we, as per plan, mitigated this situation. We cemented off the lower zone, which was very good quality, but unfortunately mostly water, only a very thin oil leg, and then moved into testing the upper zone. And in the upper zone, we needed, as is expected in Tunisia, some help Helping in this case means some acid stimulation of the upper limestone and also some nitrogen lift. The reservoir started to flow, and after 680 barrels of fluid production over about 35 hours and with declining rates, the well test was abandoned because simply we could not produce any of the oil which was interpreted on the pressure data. The conclusion was clear: any oil left behind in the upper reservoir, which was not very good quality, would certainly not be commercial. Now a bit of a technical slide, and you will see it maybe better once we put the presentation on the ASX. What essentially happened in reservoir engineering terms: we had a water breakthrough from the lower very good reservoir, and also low oil saturation and not too good quality in the upper part. In other words, that means, very simply speaking, if you got sort of a system where two things, in our case water and oil, want to escape the system, the question is, who is the winner? And in our case, the winner is decided by the water saturation. If you got very high water saturation and low permeability, at some point, and this is what the top plot shows, only water, despite the fact you have some oil in the system, will start to flow. And this is what happened in our case. In addition to that, this is something under investigation. It happens quite often in carbonate rocks that the rock is actually oil wet. That means that the oil sticks preferentially to our carbonate grains, and you need a lot of stimulation to get the oil out. Now, with our low quality reservoir in the upper part, that is certainly uncommercial. And the combination of low oil saturations, water breakthrough from the lower reservoir, just did not allow us to see any of the oil in the test. Now, I conclude my presentation with a simplified wrap-up of what happened. In the picture on the right, you actually see two columns. One shows the rock and the other one what the fluids inside are. You can see we have on the bottom a very high permeability rock where we found an oil sample. Unfortunately, the oil column in the very good rock is very thin. And then on top we have got a low saturation, low permeability rock, which will preferentially flow water. Such is an oil field which is watered out, and therefore what we have left behind is unfortunately not commercial. With that, I conclude my presentation. We also did this because we want maybe to give on the questions an outlook, Wolfgang. This is too hard to see, I know, on the webcast now, but for the viewers who then have time to go onto your ASX website, you will see that we have still a lot of opportunities in a different play fairway in Tunisia onshore in the Jorban block, which is close to the oil field, some proven kitchen area. We have a big 3D in the offshore Sicily Channel, a number of very large exploration and appraisal projects. And I think you recently have seen that our project in Romania is moving ahead, and we have found a joint venture partner who will support us in technical work, but most importantly also financially. Thank you, and I hand over to Brad for the questions now.
Paul, thank you very much. That was technical, but it was very necessary. Wolfgang, naturally the current test results have become as a disappointment for the company and of course for the investors and shareholders. How does this affect your future plans for your licenses in Tunisia?
Thank you, Brett. In the Jorban permit as such has, independent of the Sidi Daher well, several undrilled prospective structures, and even in the deeper section of the whole permit, the child well, which was drilled in the child permit immediately adjacent to our permit, has discovered gas in the Jurassic formations. So that's the potential which we have already identified, and together with our joint venture partners, after we've did all the final reports on the well, etc., we will decide where to continue to explore in Jorban first. We also have the offshore permit, which has large structures identified on 3D, which Paul has just mentioned before. We will focus for the remainder of the year on this area in Tunisia.
Okay. Well, discussions on the internet forums, naturally, unsurprisingly, show that there is some concern among shareholders for the future of ADX. What's your response? How do you counter that?
Well, first and foremost, yes, it is definitely a temporary setback for the company. But we are an exploration company. Dry holes are part of our business, unfortunately. So ADX was always and still is much more than one well a one-shot deal. Our future is defined in all of our other permits, and we shouldn't lose sight of the growth potential we have in all of our other assets in our portfolio. And we should focus now on the exploration and appraisal potential we have.
Okay. Some weeks ago, you signed a contract with the Austrian company RAG for the partial license in Romania. What are your expectations for this contract in view of what's happened at Sidi Dahe?
Yes, we signed a contract with Rohöl-Aufsuchungsgesellschaft, and that was a great step forward and part of our strategy to get 100% license interest and then farm it down. The partner permit is not affected by whatever happened in Tunisia. The partner permit holds several drillable prospects. Even small finds in this area can be put in production relatively quickly and profitably. In January 2011, we have already signed the concession agreement for this permit, and we are awaiting the Prime Minister's ratification of the permit. The period from January 2011 until today we have used for our bidding and tender process for the seismic. That has been completed, and as soon as the Prime Minister ratifies our concession agreement, we are ready to start within weeks our seismic acquisition. The drilling for this permit is planned in 2013.
Okay. Well, I suppose it's natural that the confidence of some shareholders in your company may have been compromised. How do you intend to restore that lost trust, and what do you do about the fall in the share price?
Well, first question, well, only hard work will regain confidence. Second part, also, as I said before, and let's be clear about this, nobody gives up after one dry hole. Mm-hmm. This is part of our business, and we have to continue to work hard and get the next drilling projects on the table, and work diligently and follow our strategy to bring timely and as soon as we can onshore production for our company.
Okay. We have received some questions from shareholders in advance of this webcast. In the short time remaining, I will choose some that might be of interest to you. For instance, there is one. To what extent does the negative test result in Sidi Dahe have an impact on other projects?
There is no negative impact on other projects. Again, we are an exploration company. We have to live with the fact that we drill dry holes. We have to continue to work hard and get the next drilling projects up and running. We have to develop more projects to get them on the table, to put them in a drilling phase, and then drill and be successful.
Okay. Paul, one for you. How has the 3D seismic been helpful in Sidi Dahe?
3D seismic, we don't. I think this must be confusion about the 3D seismic. We have announced we've got a lot of 3D seismic in the offshore Sicily channel, okay. But on the Sidi Dahe project we only have 2D seismic. It's very good quality, but I think the shareholder, the investor, is interested in the 3D seismic offshore Sicily channel. And if that is the question, I can answer it very positively.
The importance of
the 3D seismic was shot with a new technology, GeoStream, and has helped us tremendously to see one of the big structures, many big structures in this area. The area is recognized as being very prospective. Some very large companies in the area have been successful and picking up a lot of acreage around us. The area has been recognized as very prospective in the past, but despite the fact all the ingredients of oil and gas are there, it was difficult to see how big the structures are. And with the 3D seismic, we have made a step change in terms of risking. And although the question wasn't answered, but some people thought about the future, one of the projects is certainly the offshore Sicily channel. And with the 3D seismic, not only has the risk now tremendously decreased in seeing how big the structures are and where we should be drilling, but also in terms of finding a partner who will support us also financially, this has tremendously helped because especially the large companies nowadays would like to see big 3D seismic surveys over the projects they will be drilling.
Thank you. Wolfgang, final one for you. How much will the first well in Romania cost, and how much will ADX have to pay?
The first well will roughly cost between 2 to 2.5 million euros. Again, through our farming, we will be covered for the seismic and the cost of the first well.
Okay. Well, I think we've come to the end of our questions, and so I'd like to thank you, Wolfgang. Thank you, Paul.
Right.
We appreciate the high level of transparency in your answers. It's been something that's been asked for and I think given in full forthrightness. We also like to thank our audience for taking part in this webcast. ADX will keep you updated on any new information on its website, which is www.adxenergy.com, and the website of the Sydney Stock Exchange. And with that, we must say thank you for participating, and auf Wiedersehen from Vienna.